FreakCasters.
Menschen, Geschichten, Leidenschaften. Herzlich willkommen, sagt Sandra Knopp. Die heutige Folge erfüllt unser Team mit Stolz, denn wir feiern Jubiläum. Vor einem Jahr, am 5. Mai 2021, ging die erste Folge des Ö1-Podcasts Inklusion, gehört, gelebt online. Das Datum wurde nicht zufällig gewählt. Der 5. Mai ist jedes Jahr der europäische Protesttag für die Gleichstellung von Menschen mit Behinderung. Der Ö1-Inklusions-Podcast wird von den beiden inklusiven Redaktionen Freak Radio und andererseits gestaltet. Jeden Mittwoch gibt es eine neue Folge. Im Podcast schaffen wir Platz für die Sicht von Menschen mit Behinderung, die sonst nur wenig Gehör findet. Inklusion bedeutet für uns FreakCasters die gleichberechtigte Teilhabe von allen Menschen am gesellschaftlichen Leben. Wir sehen den Begriff Freaks als etwas Positives. Freaks sind für uns Menschen, die sich leidenschaftlich für etwas engagieren. FreakCasters entstand als Teil der Redaktion von Freak Radio, einer inklusiven Webradiosendung, die sich auf Ö1 Campus seit mehr als 20 Jahren mit allen Herausforderungen rund um das Thema Inklusion befasst. Um unseren Jahrestag entsprechend zu feiern, haben wir einen besonderen Interviewpartner zum Gespräch eingeladen. Thomas William Shakespeare ist ein britischer Soziologe, Bioethiker und Aktivist für die Rechte von Menschen mit Behinderung. Shakespeare nutzt selbst einen Rollstuhl und ist Professor für Disability Research an der London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Im Interview mit Udo Seelhofer spricht Shakespeare darüber, warum Menschen mit Behinderung der Motor hinter vielen Innovationen sind. Außerdem geht es um die Stellung von Menschen mit Behinderung in der Gesellschaft und ihre Chancen am Arbeitsmarkt. Für Shakespeare steht fest, dass die gängige Mischung aus Fürsorge und Wohltätigkeit längst nicht reicht. Es braucht echte Chancengleichheit. Wir haben das Gespräch im englischen Original belassen. Eine deutsche Übersetzung des gesamten Interviews findet sich auf www.freak-radio.at.
I think I would draw a picture of a circle. It's as simple as that. A clear, plain shape. And we want to be on the inside. And for too long, disabled people have been on the outside of ordinary life. But we want to be part of everything that everybody else does.
Why did it take so long for people to realize that?
I think we have a historical idea that disabled people are incompetent and that the role of non-disabled people is to look after them and to be kind. And we know there is much kindness in the world towards disabled people. But actually, disabled people deserve, want rights, the same as everybody else. And if we realize how often we are in the way of inclusion of disabled people, we realize that it's not our charity that is required, but it is to respect the rights of disabled people.
I always think that it's a bit patronizing if you think you have to be...
I mean, Austrian people in other countries in Europe are very kind. And that is, we are very, not ungrateful. But actually, we want you to get out of our way to make your metro accessible, your healthcare accessible, inclusion in education and so forth. And then we can be like you. That's what we want. And hopefully we will all be kind to each other. But ultimately, we want our rights.
In your speech in the Austrian Parliament, you mentioned that inclusion and accessibility will be two of the biggest challenges in the 21st century. Why is that so?
Well, let's think about where Light for the World works, which is in African countries like Mozambique and Uganda and Ethiopia. And they will not develop without including disabled people. We want education for all, healthcare for all, employment for all. But of course, disabled people are 15% of the population. So how can you possibly achieve everything until we are all included? And that goes for the Sustainable Development Goals. How can you reduce violence against women if you don't remember that disabled women are far more likely to experience violence? Mm-hmm. So by including us, you can deliver equality for everyone.
But how can we as a society master these challenges?
Well, let's think about Austria, which is a wonderful country, as I said in my speech yesterday. But you have institutions where many people with disabilities live. You have special education where many children with disabilities are educated, and you have sheltered workshops. And I feel, in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Austria, like Britain, like all our African friends, should be aspiring to an inclusive society where disabled children are educated alongside non-disabled children. Because you know what? It'll be better for both. And where people live alongside other Austrians, it will be better for both. And finally, that in your workplace, whether it's a radio station or a university or even a shop, disabled people should be part of the staff.
You just mentioned education and education in Austria. You also did that in your speech yesterday when you said that many Austrian children with disabilities still go to special schools. Why is this a problem in your eyes?
Well, think of the non-disabled child growing up, and they never see a disabled child, and they think they're special or separate and different to them. But if they're educated alongside them, then they realize that society should include disabled children. Let me tell you the story. I went to talk at a Swiss school, and I was talking about a book they were reading called, it was about the dog in the nighttime. It's that famous book by Mark Haddon. And in the middle of my talk, one of the children jumped to their feet, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're not very happy. But I realized that everybody ignored them, and that all the other children ignored them, and the teachers ignored them. And then I became comfortable ignoring them. And I realized they were obviously themselves neurodivergent and sometimes jumped to their feet, which is unpredictable behavior. But it's fine. And they were part of the mainstream school. And in the same way that, obviously, all children are different, then we can include children who are very different. And the fundamental thing that all children need is education. And it doesn't matter whether they have a disability or not, they need education. And when I was first looking at this area, a parent of a child with Down syndrome said to me, tell them not to worry about the gap. I said, what do you mean? She said, in education, people are always worrying about the gap between a child perhaps with Down syndrome or other intellectual disability and everybody else. The gap doesn't matter. The child with intellectual disability may never catch up, probably will never catch up, but are they benefiting? Are they progressing? Is their speech getting better? Are they understanding more of what they read? Then they are being educated, and that's what we want to achieve.
Another problem that's thought about is that the children and the non-disabled children, if they do not get in contact with people with disabilities, they don't know how to react when they meet them later in life.
Exactly. And I tell you, I went to, in a way, a special school. It was a private school in England, and it was all boys and no women, and so no girls. And so when we graduated at age 18, we didn't know how to speak to girls. We didn't know how to approach them. I went to university. Oh, my goodness, loads of girls. Mm-hmm. That is how it should be. But it's very odd to have single-sex education, and it's also very odd that we exclude disabled children. Because, as I said, fundamentally they need the same thing, which is good teaching. And in an ordinary school, I hope we have mental health support. I hope we have other forms of support for children who need it in an ordinary school. And it may be that we need that specialism that you get in a special school, but we can deliver it through a mainstream school to everybody's benefit.
Your speech in the Austrian Parliament was accessible via live stream, which was not very common just a few years back. How can these modern technologies be a part of the solution?
It's very interesting because here we are at the Zero Project in Vienna, and we are learning so many exciting projects which use technology. Yesterday we learned about a startup from Israel which will convert distorted or speech impaired into clear speech. And that is brilliant for everybody with a speech impediment, because suddenly they can converse with their schoolmates, their family, the shop, clearly. And even more importantly, perhaps, they can tell Alexa what they want. They can converse with the whole electronic world that we now have using this technology. And I think that is one example of how we can overcome some of the barriers through technology. Nowadays, we all meet on Zoom. We all meet on Teams, and that includes disabled people. And I think that breaks down the barriers. It doesn't matter if you're blind, if you're deaf, as long as there's subtitling, if you're perhaps have autism or are neurodivergent. You can interact using Teams, Zoom, and all the rest of it. So it does offer disabled people great potential. This has been a terrible time of the corona pandemic, and many disabled people have died. But as long as we don't forget what we've learned, we could have a better world afterwards.
So you think that the pandemic accelerated this development in digitalization?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've been abroad for nearly 2 years. And, in the meantime, between then and now, I have been on Zoom, on Teams. I have been researching throughout the United Kingdom about corona impact. I've been researching with teams in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Uganda, Bangladesh, all of which is facilitated by Zoom and Teams. So, yeah, I think it has now, you know what I'm talking about by Zoom and Teams. You didn't know, or you may have known, but our audience didn't know what we were talking about 2 years ago. Now they shop, they chat, they do quizzes, they listen to culture, they learn all through the internet. So as long as you have internet, it is liberating. But we need to remember the survey in the UK found that disabled people were 50% more likely not to have internet. So we need to overcome that digital divide.
Why is that so?
I think that half of all disabled people are older people. So that may explain why some people are not online, although I know many older people are online, not all. I think it's also about poverty. So if you don't have enough money, you can't get online. You can literally not afford the laptop. Or if you're excluded from education and employment, you may not have the training to use the technology. So lots of factors like that. But we can overcome them, and we should. Very interesting, in the UK, when the pandemic struck, some of the non-governmental organisations converted their funding from live events to notebooks, laptops and so forth, and they gave them to disabled people so that then they could participate. And we need to make sure that everybody can participate.
Do you think that the digitalization offers new chances in the labour market for people with disabilities?
I think that, yes, digitalization offers new chances. For example, if you work in the knowledge economy, then you can work from home. You don't have to travel, so you can overcome the barriers. If you are basically using a computer, you can be visually impaired and use JAWS software, which converts all of the things that we see into things that people can hear. And so we know that many blind people have been very active online. And similarly, if you're neurodivergent and perhaps you don't want to be in an office with 50 people, you can work in an office with one person, or you can be at home. You don't have to encounter those times that are troubling to you, like rush hour, peak hour on the trains and so forth. So I think there's lots of ways you can overcome that. And I'm just talking about basic things. And then, of course, we have things that we've been learning about this week in Zero Project. So, for example, there's a technology called Be My Eyes. And so this is for visually impaired people. And when they encounter something they can't see, then they connect with a volunteer who is obviously sighted, who explains it to them. And it's it need only be a very short interaction. But they can say, okay, through the Zoom or whatever they use, I can see that there are 3 buttons and they're marked X, Y, Z, and it looks to me like you need to press this button. And away you go. And the person who presented it to us yesterday in Austrian Parliament mentioned an instance, I think in Hungary, where somebody was the blind person was put off the bus in the middle of the night in a very unfamiliar location, very dangerous. But through this Be My Eyes software, they were connected with somebody who could advise them, and knew Hungarian, who was somewhere in North America, and stayed with them online for, I think, several hours until they got back and reached their bus and got to their destination. So I think, that is technology, bringing people together. And I think to use the technology to bring people together, to overcome the barriers, whatever their working expectations are, is really exciting.
I think it's also important to add that these technologies should not be used as an excuse by the employer.
Absolutely. I don't think that it means that the future generation of disabled people just have to sit at home and because home is accessible. Not at all. I think it shouldn't be an excuse by the city or the employer to think that they don't have to make accessible workplaces, accessible transport, accessible public spaces. Of course not. But it can add to the efficiency of everybody. And it's very interesting. I'm working at a university, and as I said, I've been home for the last few years. But when we can meet face to face, and you can look me in the eye, we have a better quality of interview, I'm sure, than if we were doing it over Zoom. So it will never substitute for face to face. We had a board meeting of Light for the World yesterday, and being able to interact with people in the same room was very helpful. And we could reach agreement quicker, and we understood quicker. There's no substitute for face-to-face. However, this mediated communication has all sorts of uses. In my workplace, we are going back to the office. Fantastic. And the expectation for our employer, we shouldn't have to be there 5 days. It is expected we are there 2 days if we're full-time. And we need to make sure all our meetings coincide, so we can meet each other face-to-face or mask-to-mask in the same building, in the same office, and that we also improve accessibility there. I think it'll be interesting because we will all have, I suspect, hot desks, hot offices. When we need to have a private meeting, we will have a space for us like we have here in a quiet part of the UN building. And the rest of the time we'll have a hot desk and we'll just be at all together. I think everything I've said is relevant to people working in the knowledge economy. It's more complicated, but by no means impossible if you're working in agriculture or you're working in other places. One of Light for the World's, in a way, spin-offs is presenting accessible agriculture. And they are a group in Cambodia who are going it alone, if you like. And we wish them well. They were part of the Light family, and now they're becoming independent in their own right. And they are trying to ensure that disabled people can participate in agriculture. So they will have all sorts of solutions for that. I look forward to hearing more. They're presenting this week at the conference, the Zero Project here.
How's the situation for disabled people at the labour market in general?
I think that in Austria, employment of disabled people is going down. I don't know why, because I don't know enough about the Austrian labour market. But I can tell you in Britain, it's really difficult to find the right person for the job. It's the same, I know, in Austria. So if we are facing, in a way, a crisis, because they are qualified people can pick and choose. They can expect more in terms of money or whatever. Then we need to turn to disabled people because they have all the skills, they want the job. Why not employ them? And I think that applies in Austria, and it applies in the United Kingdom, and frankly, it applies in Africa too.
That remembers me of another part of your speech where you said that disabled people are often the motor of innovation, the driving force behind it, and you mentioned the scooter.
Yeah. So for example, I have back home an electric motor attachment for my wheelchair. And in the city, it enables me to whiz for 10 kilometers or something before I need to recharge it. Now, I've had that for a few years. And then I noticed London is full of e-scooters. Everybody has them, and they zoom around. And all of the delivery drivers have e-bicycles. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, we started this. In the past, it was power wheelchair users and people like me with assistance power, all of those lithium batteries and all the rest of it that they are now using. We came up with first. We were the first market. And similarly, I notice on my telephone, I can listen to all sorts of books. And so many people listen to books on their devices. Where did this come from? Well, it was blind people, old people who started listening to books on tape. And suddenly everybody got the hang of it. Everybody wanted to use this. And now it is a common technology for all. So my argument yesterday was that actually, many of the times, finding the solutions for disabled people actually benefits everybody.
Yeah, it's progress in technology and in many other fields.
Exactly. I mean, they're not always moving forward. And I can tell you, many of your listeners will use touchscreens on your telephones. Mm-hmm. They're really difficult for blind people. You can think about it. If you move from buttons to touch screens, suddenly blind people don't know where to put their fingers. And similarly, many urban environments, they're saying, oh, we'll have a mixed-use urban environment for cars, bicycles, scooters, pedestrians. They will all anticipate each other and we don't need to have crossings. Hang on a minute. What about blind people? They don't know not to step out in front of a bicycle. They don't know where to cross the road. So we need to make sure that all of our inclusive solutions are really inclusive to everybody with our different physical needs and way of negotiating or using technology in the urban environment.
And if I look at it from the perspective of the employer, I would be very, stupid, to be honest, if someone who is an innovator and I wouldn't just employ him.
Yeah, I mean, we all benefit. We've been talking about the internet. Who built the internet? If you go to Silicon Valley, how many people who are neurodivergent will you find? A lot. Bill Gates, I believe, is an autistic person. Many people who are really good engineers, really good technology people, really good people for the internet or web design are themselves disabled in some way. And it goes to show that actually we need all the talents of all our people. And rather than seeing disability as a problem, if we can see diversity as an advantage, then some of the problems like global warming or the tech revolution may prove to be more easily solved.
Another problem that occurs very often for everyone is that people who are looking for a job have to make big compromises so that they fit the description and so they maybe have a chance to get the job. While that job or employers don't do that at all. How can this be fixed?
I think that when the labour market is tight, when everybody has to be employed, then suddenly women with children or of bearing age, or disabled people or older people look much more attractive to employers because employers need the task done. And if they are prejudiced, they will not see all the people ready to do them. And the evidence shows that disabled people are really good employees. They're very loyal, they're very hardworking, they want the job, and it's much more difficult for a disabled person, if you like, to shop around to see, I'll take that one, not that one. So, if the employer can be flexible, then the disabled person will give good rewards, will give back very well. And if you say, that's unreasonable, you can't expect employers to fit disabled people in, then, we have to say disabled people will make you money, but also we have to say, look, you had to fit in women a few years ago, and it's also benefited it's the flexibility. We don't want all to be white, male, able-bodied, Austrian or British people. We need to have the diversity because that is where we get the benefit. That is where, our workplace looks like the outside world, but also our workplace has all the skills that we need to resolve and to address the problems of today.
I think another advantage of disabled workers in your firm is that they also open a new perspective regarding disabled customers, maybe.
Exactly. I think that having disabled staff means that you not only might solve problems that you're faced with in your business, but also you have more insight into the range of people who may want to use your services, buy your products, participate in your spaces. And I think that it can stop you making mistakes. One of the really interesting pieces of research was that found making premises or services accessible, and you might think it's costly. It is costly to what we call retrofit, to make the adaptations later. But if they're designed to be inclusive from the start, then it probably only adds 1% or 0.5% to the cost. But it actually opens you up to a much bigger market of people who might want to buy your services. And it's like, I'm 55, I don't understand young people. So it'd be very foolish of me not to have any young people in my workforce, in my office, because I would never understand young people. They can say, no, that won't work, try it again, call it something different, approach people in a different way. And I go, thank you, that's really helpful. You've given me insight I would not otherwise have. Exactly the same with disabled people. They will say, no, that sounds patronizing, rephrase it, this will work for these people. And that way we can grow our market and sell more products. And at the end of the day, that's what a business is about.
So from a business standpoint, you could say that it's really clever to hire disabled people because the potential profit exceeds the costs by far.
I would say so. And one of the conclusion, the opening conclusion of my talk to the Austrian Parliament yesterday, I'm British, as you know, and I spend all my time listening to the work of Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert. They fill my life with joy. All of them had impairments. We know about Beethoven's deafness, but many musicians, somebody today came up and talked to me about Schumann. Many musicians have some sort of disability which may impede their life in some way, but they bring joy to us. And my message was, yes, by all means listen to music, but my message was, listen to disabled people, because they will bring joy to your life, because they will expand your vision of what is possible, they will create wonderful work that you will benefit from, and if you have a diverse workforce, diverse public, diverse creative arts, then you really will benefit from all of those different contributions.
Since you mentioned classical music, what would a song of inclusion sound like?
I think that one of our Zero Project awardees yesterday was talking about music that is created by people who use only movement of their eyes. And it presented this wonderful musical interface. And all these children and young people using music who could never previously have been included, because with their eyes, they played it. And it was truly remarkable. Now, we know maybe only 20% of the population are really good at music, but why would disability be an obstacle? So the song of disability would include those people. It would include those people with one hand or no hand. It would include the voices of all sorts of different people who each have something to contribute. So it would be a wonderful choir which everybody's talents could be involved in. So, yeah, it's inclusion. It's a circle. It's the same message.
You've been to Vienna a few times now. Does the city do a good job, inclusion-wise?
I think it's not bad at all. I mean, I was talking to my colleague and I said, I want to go to the Kunsthistorische Museum. I'm going to take the first underground U1. Will that be accessible? He said, yes, it's very good. So I have my electronic map of Vienna. I will go to the Kunsthistorische Museum, my favourite place, and I will see the work of Bruegel, one of my favourite artists, after having coffee and cake in a cafe in a very traditional Viennese way. So I think Vienna does get it. I think more is needed in Austria to make sure that disabled people are fully included. That's what I said at the parliament. But nobody came up to me and said, how dare you? They came up to me and said, thank you. They came up to me and said, yes, you're right. We do need to address the barriers and make it more inclusive. So we're all on the same journey. And Austria has taken some really important steps. And I love Austria. I hope very much that we're all meeting up at the same place.
What's your opinion about representation of people with disabilities in British media?
I think that traditionally it's been bad, and that we've had, for example, non-disabled people pretending to be disabled, or we've made jokes at the expense of disabled people. But now we realize that disabled people are not just tragic or super wonderful crippled. They are ordinary people. So we have richer representations. And we also have some really good actors. I'm talking about, for example, Liz Carr in Silent Witness. I'm talking about Matt Fraser in many, many productions. I'm talking about, of course, we all know Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones and Cyrano. So if you have proper actors who have all the skills of everybody else, who everybody knows who they are and that they can, as it were, lead a film, then you're moving in the right direction. And it's the same as black actors or gay actors or whatever. It's a richer palette if you have the diversity of people. And to remember that disabled people live lives like everybody else, really. They fall in love, they get their hearts broken, they can be wonderful, they can be pathetic or whatever, but they should not ever be stereotyped. And traditional representations were very stereotyped and didn't really capture that richness.
How could this be improved?
I think it'd be improved by having disabled people as writers and disabled people as actors and directors behind the camera, in front of the camera, so that they know that actually we can do better. We can really tell the stories that are most moving, most funny, most understandable, and then we can overcome the gap that exists between disabled people and other people and realize that what matters is that it's people and they do everything else the same. So why not show them alongside non-disabled people? I was really interested the other day, a friend, or not a friend, I didn't know him, a gentleman who used a wheelchair came to interview me about eugenics, as it happened. And when we were talking, it turned out that he was one of the writers for Coronation Street, which is a major soap opera in Britain. And here he was, a wheelchair user, and he was one of the writers for Coronation. And I thought that's exactly what we want. We want people like you writing the scripts that everybody benefits from. And it's the same for any movie. We have comedy shows on mainstream TV. There's one called A Last Leg with a bunch of disabled people. And yeah, they're very funny. And so it should be.
Why is the work of Light for the World important, in your opinion?
I think that what we need is to continue solidarity between the north of countries and the southern countries, and between non-disabled people and disabled people. We still have a long way to go, as we all know, before countries like Ethiopia and South Sudan and Mozambique and Uganda and Burkina Faso are truly equal. So we still need to stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends in the global south. We still need to contribute so that they can have better eye care, better education, better employment prospects. One day we won't have to, as it were, dig into our own pockets. But in the meantime, we can't leave it all to government. We have to show solidarity. And that's why Light for the World tries to channel all of the donations of our Austrian friends, our British friends, German, Swiss, Dutch, Belgian, whatever, into really good projects. And what we're trying to do in the Global South is not just sort of sticking plasters, but transformations. So we're working system change to ensure that, for example, children get education. At the moment, something like a third of out-of-school children in the Global South are disabled children. And that's intolerable. I've told you how we live in a knowledge economy. If children with disabilities do not access education, they have no chance in the knowledge economy. They are an untapped talent. So what we're trying to do is to ensure they get the education that can make them productive. And similarly, the employment choices to enable them to get a job. We have wonderful inclusion facilitators, a wonderful model that is strong in Kenya and in Uganda, and we're trying to spread to more countries, whereby we train disabled young people really to advise on removal of barriers and inclusion. And they're great at it. It works. and we want other people to know about it, and that's why, we tell people our story.
What do we as a society need to learn regarding inclusion?
I think that we need to listen to disabled people. They're the people that experience the barriers. So if we start by listening in a sort of humble way, then we will understand where the problems are. And if we can then work together to remove the barriers, for example, I went to a college in Cambridge that didn't have women the year before I came. And suddenly it had women. And it had to, as it were, treat people equally. Nowadays, we would think it was extraordinary that any educational resource was not open to women. And I think in years to come, we will think it's extraordinary that the mainstream didn't used to be open to disabled people. And we will thank our lucky stars, thank God, whatever it might be, that now, finally, disabled people can do everything that everybody else wanted to do.
And what can I, as an individual, do to further this?
Well, I think just speaking very personally, you as a radio interviewer are helping me tell our story. But you as a citizen can look and say, well, no, we need a ramp here. We need to not throw our bicycles there. Why can't other people use this when they could benefit from it? Just to take one example, I do a lot of speaking to many different audiences. And we in English, we talk about something called a manel. And a manel, as you know, is when the whole panel consists of men. Man, 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 man. And I think it's incumbent on men to say, no, I won't participate in this because it excludes half the population. Do better. And in the same way, I think non-disabled people can say, hang on a minute, this venue that you're holding a meeting in is not accessible to disabled people. I will not participate. There isn't a ramp, there isn't an elevator, there isn't a toilet. I'm not coming to your meeting until you sort this out. So it is things that non-disabled people can do that help us remove the barriers. Because disabled people didn't put the barriers there. You did. So you remove them with our advice and we'll all benefit.
I think those are very powerful words to close out our interview. Mr. Shakespeare, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Sie hörten ein Gespräch mit dem britischen Soziologen, Bioethiker und Aktivisten Thomas William Shakespeare. Das Gespräch führte Udo Seelhofer im Rahmen der Zero-Conference 2022 in der UNO-City in Wien. Tom Shakespeare lebt mit Achondroplasie, die häufigste Form des Kleinwuchses. Wie im Gespräch anklingt, verwendet er im Alltag einen Rollstuhl. Das war FreakCasters für heute. Wir freuen uns schon auf ein weiteres Jahr voller spannender Podcasts, die wir für Sie vorbereiten. Wenn Ihnen diese Folge gefallen hat, dann empfehlen Sie uns doch bitte weiter und hinterlassen uns eine gute Bewertung auf der Podcast-App Ihrer Wahl. Wir freuen uns schon auf ein Wiederhören bei der nächsten Folge. Am Mikrofon verabschiedet sich Sandra Knopp.